There is a photograph taken on November 25, 1963. In the middle of a tearful national funeral, little John, just 3 years old, stood there in confusion and raised his right hand in a salute to his father's casket. A photographer who was present there later said that it was the saddest scene he had ever witnessed in his entire career. However, if you look closely at that photograph, something haunting begins to emerge. That immortal image unintentionally placed a crown far too heavy upon the head of a child before he had the chance to develop a personality of his own. Everyone knows the name Kennedy, the most royal family in America, with wealth and glamour. What very few people know is that beneath those luxurious privileges lay a desperate escape from the world and a lonely, merciless ending in the depths of the dark sea. His name was John F. Kennedy Jr., and this is his story. John F. Kennedy Jr. was born on November 25, 1960, at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C., exactly 17 days after his father defeated Richard Nixon to win one of the closest presidential elections in American history. The first years of John's life unfolded inside the White House, an environment completely different from the world of ordinary children outside. The little boy often ran around on the White House lawn and was photographed sitting beneath the desk in the Oval Office while his father conducted top-secret meetings with advisors and cabinet members. The press continuously captured and broadcast these images, turning his family into a symbol of youth and vitality for all of America and a proud representation of a golden age at its brightest peak. A journalist misheard the president calling his son's name twice in a row, and from that moment on, gave him the nickname John, a name that was widely used by the media even though his family never called him that. But those fairy tale days came to a sudden and cruel end on November 22, 1963, when President Kennedy's motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, and he was assassinated before the shock of the entire world. 3 days later, on November 25, exactly on little John's 3rd birthday, a tearful state funeral was held in Washington. The boy wore a light blue coat and white gloves, standing silently on the steps of the historic St. Matthew Church. As his father's flag-draped casket passed by on a horse-drawn carriage, John stepped forward and raised his right hand to his forehead in a military salute. At that moment, the little boy was simply imitating the actions of the grown soldiers around him in innocent confusion. Photographer Dan Farrell was there and later told the press that it was the saddest scene he had ever witnessed in his entire career. That photograph was immediately printed on the front pages of newspapers around the world, becoming an immortal symbol of national grief and continuing to be republished for decades afterward. Audiences saw a young hero, but John himself later openly shared with the media that he had absolutely no memory of the funeral day. The image of the 3-year-old boy raising his hand in salute unintentionally assigned him an enormous symbolic role before he was old enough to form a personality of his own. But when the cameras of the press moved away and the national flag was folded, the real life of a young boy under the curious eyes of all of America officially began, exposing the outward glamour but the hidden tragedy behind an aristocratic family. Immediately after the funeral, his mother, Jackie Kennedy, decided to take her 2 children away from Washington, a city filled with painful memories. At first, they moved into a rented house in Georgetown, but by 1964, she relocated John and his sister Caroline permanently to a massive 15-room apartment at 1040 Fifth Avenue in New York City. This upper-class apartment overlooked Central Park and the renowned Metropolitan Museum of Art. His mother always wanted her children to live a life as close to normal as possible. She made John walk to school by himself, ride the subway on his own, and stand in line at fast food shops to buy sandwiches. However, money cannot protect you from the cruel scrutiny of the world, as agents of the United States Secret Service constantly followed closely behind him to carry out protection duties, and dozens of paparazzi trailed him every day like ghosts the moment he stepped outside. Jackie even had to bitterly sue a notorious paparazzo named Ron Galella in court to obtain a restraining order preventing him from coming near her family, in order to protect the small amount of peace they had left. In June 1968, another fatal gunshot rang out. His uncle Robert Kennedy, who had frequently visited, called, and served as a father figure for John, was shot and killed in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, only minutes after winning the California Democratic presidential primary. At that time, John was only 7 years old, and he remembered the taste of grief and fear very clearly. After witnessing the two people closest to him brutally murdered by gun violence, his mother decided to remarry Greek shipping tycoon Aristotle Onassis in October 1968. This marriage brought them millions of dollars along with strict private security protection, while also creating a geographical distance that moved her children away from the public attention of America. As he grew older, John chose to respond to camera lenses by constantly moving at high speed. He roller skated shirtless through the paths of Central Park wearing $100 skates weaved through Manhattan traffic on his bicycle and kayaked across wide stretches of water. This constant physical activity was his desperate way of escaping the paparazzi, who were always waiting outside his home. He attended prestigious private schools in New York such as Collegiate, and later, the elite boarding school Phillips Academy Andover in Massachusetts, the same school his father had attended. In 1978, Jackie arranged for John to work a physically demanding job at a cattle ranch in Wyoming for 6 weeks to strengthen his character. When he entered college, John deliberately broke family tradition by choosing not to attend Harvard University and instead enrolled at Brown University in Rhode Island, where he earned a bachelor's degree in American history. There, he moved out and lived in a simple shared rental house with other students, experiencing a normal and independent life like everyone else. As he grew older, John possessed an exceptionally striking appearance, with glossy black curly hair, deep brown eyes, and a perfect athletic build. In 1988, at only 27 years old and before establishing any major career achievements, People magazine placed his face on its cover and named him the sexiest man alive. Despite the public excitement and women everywhere tearing that cover off newsstands, John deeply hated the title. Friends later recalled that he frowned, threw those magazines into the trash, and asked the people around him never to mention that article again because he understood very clearly that the price of privilege always came with ridicule. Any famous woman seen beside him, from actress Daryl Hannah and singer Madonna to Sarah Jessica Parker, immediately became the ruthless target of paparazzi and appeared in newspapers every day. Sarah Jessica Parker later told the media that she had never truly understood what fame was until she dated John, an overwhelming experience inside the mysterious world of long-established wealthy families. Even while being watched by the public everywhere he went, John still had to face his own silent struggles and answer the biggest question of his life. Who was he really once the Kennedy name was stripped away? At Brown University, John discovered that he truly loved acting. He participated in university theater productions and performed his roles very well. On the brilliant stage, he was not the son of the late President Kennedy. He was simply a character in a play, free to live another life and speak someone else's lines. But his mother, Jackie, strongly opposed it. She did not want her son to become an actor, fearing that it would affect the family image, and insisted that he study law in order to continue the political legacy. Following his mother's wishes, John enrolled in the New York University School of Law. However, his study of law did not go smoothly, and this was when his first shattered dreams began to appear. John failed the New York State Bar examination twice in a row. The media immediately seized the opportunity to launch ruthless attacks through their articles. Tabloids printed mocking headlines in large capital letters across their front pages. The handsome guy failed the exam. He was ridiculed and mocked by all of America, but instead of giving up in humiliation, John quietly continued studying and passed on his third attempt. After earning his license, John worked as a prosecutor at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office under Robert Morgenthau. He earned a modest salary of $30,000 a year and rode his bicycle to work every day instead of using chauffeur-driven cars like other members of the Kennedy family. During his 4 years there, John personally stood in court, participated in real criminal cases, and finished with a record of winning 6 cases and losing 2. Colleagues later recalled that he always came to the office and worked diligently, handled his responsibilities himself, and never used the Kennedy name to ask for any special treatment. However, the dry work of preparing legal files in court never brought excitement to a free spirit. He once answered the press directly and helplessly, saying, "I am not the great lawyer Clarence Darrow. What do people really want from my life?" Finally, in July 1993, John officially submitted his resignation from the prosecutor's office in order to find his own path, beginning the process of stepping away from the strict direction his family had laid out for him since birth. But have you ever wondered what happens when the person who has always guided you, protected you, and served as the greatest source of support in your life suddenly disappears? In 1994, when John F. Kennedy Jr. turned 33, his mother, former First Lady Jackie Kennedy Onassis, was diagnosed with lymphoma. Although she agreed to give up her habit of smoking 3 packs a day at the urging of her children, in an attempt to hold on to the little time she had left, the devastating illness still claimed her life only 5 months later, on May 19, 1994. Jackie's passing immediately drew the attention of the entire American media. The very next day, news cameras captured John wearing a blue suit, quietly stepping outside and standing in front of the street outside the building at 1040 Fifth Avenue in New York to announce the heartbreaking news to reporters. At his mother's funeral, John stepped up to the podium and read a passage from Paul's second letter to the Thessalonians amid the overwhelming atmosphere of grief. Jackie left her children a vast fortune worth $43.7 million, including the majestic 15-room apartment in New York and a 366-acre estate in Martha's Vineyard. But more important than the inheritance itself, just before closing her eyes forever, the Great Mother left John with one final statement in place of a blessing. "Go and use your name. You deserve it." For John, those words officially removed the final barrier, allowing him the freedom to determine his own path without forcing himself to study law or follow the direction his family had planned for him any longer. This newfound freedom immediately led to a decision that shocked the media and politicians in Washington. John did not run for political office as everyone had expected. He decided to start a magazine. In September 1995, he officially launched a magazine called George in partnership with his friend Michael Berman, naming it after the first president of the United States, George Washington. John's idea was very practical. He wanted to combine political news with popular culture and entertainment, making politics more interesting and accessible to the public. To carry out this project, his company Random Ventures received $20 million in investment funding from the major publishing corporation, Hachette Filipacci. To attract buyers from the very first issue, John placed supermodel Cindy Crawford on the cover. In the photograph, Cindy was styled as George Washington with a powdered white wig, wearing colonial clothing and intentionally revealing her bare midriff. The image immediately created a sensation on newsstands, helping the magazine sell 500,000 copies during its first release, generating approximately $1.5 million and becoming the biggest magazine launch of the year. That was the outward glamour. The tragedy behind it was silently waiting. But John was not simply lending the Kennedy name as a promotional tool. He truly worked like a dedicated office employee. People at the George editorial office recalled that he was always the first to arrive at work while the city streets were still asleep, the last to leave after the streetlights had already come on, and directly involved himself in layout design, photo selection, and content direction. When the magazine needed advertising revenue to survive, he put on a suit, carried his briefcase into meeting rooms, and presented business plans to persuade major partners. He personally conducted interviews with attention-grabbing figures, from former heavyweight boxer Mike Tyson and pornography magazine publisher Larry Flynt to the Dalai Lama. When the company's board suggested that he interview Princess Diana to increase magazine sales, John flatly refused because he only wanted to work with people he was genuinely interested in. Although the magazine later faced financial difficulties and conflicts that eventually led to co-founder Michael Berman leaving, it was still the first business project that John built with his own hands, an effort to escape the shadow of his family name within the pressure-filled secret world of the old elite. At a time when his publishing career was attracting considerable attention, John experienced a major turning point in his personal life when he began a relationship with a woman completely outside the world of politics. Her name was Carolyn Bessette, a shopping consultant and public relations employee working for Calvin Klein in New York. Unlike the famous Hollywood actresses John had previously dated, Carolyn was an ordinary citizen. The press reported that they accidentally crossed paths while jogging in Central Park, but factual information later confirmed that they actually met when John visited a Calvin Klein store to buy clothes, and Carolyn was assigned to assist him directly. From their very first meeting, Carolyn displayed a highly confident attitude and showed no signs of being intimidated by the Kennedy name. In fact, Her supervisor at Calvin Klein later recalled that she treated him like any other ordinary customer. When John first asked her out, she flatly turned him down. That decisive attitude and equal treatment strongly attracted John, a man who had always been accustomed to people automatically agreeing with him because of his fame. He continued pursuing her until she finally accepted. By 1995, Carolyn officially moved in with John in a $700,000 loft apartment in the Tribeca neighborhood of New York. That summer, while the two were fishing together on a boat in the peaceful waters of Martha's Vineyard, John proposed to her. He told her that everything in life, not just fishing, would be better with a companion, and that he wanted her to become his partner in life. Even so, Carolyn did not immediately agree and asked for a few weeks to think about it, because she clearly understood that marrying someone with the Kennedy name would cause the media to follow her every day and bring an end to her anonymous life. She feared the silent struggles that would come with it. But in the end, love prevailed, and she accepted his proposal. To ease Carolyn's concerns about the media, John decided to plan a wedding so secret that not a single newspaper would be able to uncover it. On February 21, 1996, they held their wedding on Cumberland Island, a remote island off the coast of Georgia. The place had no commercial airport, no bridge connecting it to the mainland, only red dirt roads and wild horses roaming freely through ancient forests. To ensure complete secrecy, the guest list was limited to only about 30 to 40 people, including family members and a few of their closest friends. Guests were not informed of the exact location until the last moment. They were given rare coins and instructed that they had to provide the correct password to security personnel in order to enter the wedding area. The royal wedding had turned into a maximum security operation. The ceremony took place that day at the First African Baptist Church, a small wooden chapel built by formerly enslaved people in the 1890s. Since the chapel had no electrical system, the entire evening ceremony was illuminated only by the soft and dreamlike glow of candles. Carolyn walked in wearing a pearl-colored silk crepe wedding dress designed by her friend Narciso Rodriguez, valued at $40,000 and requiring 2 separate fitting sessions lasting 3 hours each in Paris. John wore a dark blue wool suit with an elegant white waistcoat. Standing beside him was his cousin Anthony Radziwill as best man, while his sister Caroline Kennedy served as maid of honor. The ceremony remained completely private, with no flashing cameras, and immediately afterward, the couple flew to Turkey for their honeymoon. It was not until the following day that the press discovered what had happened, and newspapers complained because they had been unable to gain access or capture a single photograph. The event was a successful effort by John to protect his wife from media attention, but at the same time, it became the spark that caused paparazzi to follow them even more aggressively every day after the couple returned to their normal life in New York. Every day, dozens of paparazzi waited outside their apartment in the Tribeca neighborhood. They followed Carolyn on every street corner, shouting insults at her simply to provoke a reaction and capture moments of anger on camera. Without the media handling skills of the Kennedy family, Carolyn chose to withdraw into herself. She quit her job, locked herself inside the house for days at a time with her dog named Friday, and even stopped seeing her therapist because paparazzi followed her all the way to the clinic door. John, who had been familiar with camera lenses since the age of 3, viewed the paparazzi as nothing more than a minor annoyance and advised his wife to ignore them. This difference created enormous cracks in their relationship. The breaking point came in February 1996, when a video of the couple having a heated argument at Battery Park was leaked. In the footage, John forcefully grabbed Carolyn's hand to remove her engagement ring, after which Carolyn rushed forward and grabbed his shirt from behind, and the two engaged in a fierce struggle. The tabloid National Enquirer paid a 6-figure sum to purchase the footage and broadcast it nationwide. Carolyn immediately became the target of public criticism. At the same time, everything around John also began to collapse. The political magazine George, which he had founded and which had sold 500,000 copies in its first issue, was now falling rapidly. After co-founder Michael Berman left because of internal conflicts, advertising revenue declined severely. The magazine continuously suffered losses of as much as $200,000 per issue. The publishing company Hachette began issuing ultimatums and considered ending its financial support. The pressure of work weighed heavily on John, while his cousin and closest childhood friend Anthony Radziwill was in the final stages of bone cancer. As if that were not enough, political figures constantly surrounded John, pressuring him to run for the soon-to-be vacant New York Senate seat, a position that First Lady Hillary Clinton was also pursuing. Mountains of pressure from a failing business, a dying loved one, public expectations, and a marriage on the edge of collapse all came crashing down at once on the 38-year-old man. The peak of fame had become a pit of despair. And then the tragedy began to unfold. On Friday afternoon, July 16, 1999, John planned to personally fly his wife and his sister-in-law, Carolyn Bessette, to Martha's Vineyard before continuing on to attend the wedding of his cousin, Rory Kennedy. At that time, John's physical condition was far from ideal. He had suffered a broken ankle from a paragliding accident 6 weeks earlier. His leg was still in a brace, and he was taking pain medication. More importantly, John's flight records showed that he was still a relatively inexperienced pilot with approximately 310 total flight hours, including only 72 hours of solo flight time. With the newer Piper Saratoga aircraft, he had accumulated only 3 hours of solo flight experience. He also did not possess an instrument rating, meaning he was only qualified to fly under clear weather conditions where he could maintain visual contact with the horizon. John's flight instructor had offered to accompany him on this trip, but John firmly refused and wanted to take control himself. The price of the privilege to choose can sometimes become the mistake of misplaced confidence. The original plan was to take off at 5:30 in the afternoon to make use of daylight, but a series of problems delayed the schedule. Carolyn had not wanted to attend the wedding because she was exhausted by the attention surrounding the Kennedy family, but her sister Lauren persuaded her and acted as a mediator. Lauren had to work late at Morgan Stanley, and combined with the terrible Friday rush hour traffic in New York, they arrived at Essex County Airport several hours late. It was not until 8:38 that evening that the plane finally began moving down the runway. The sun was setting rapidly, and John would now have to make the flight across the ocean in complete darkness. Although air traffic control reported that weather conditions on the ground remained within acceptable limits, a thick layer of fog was rapidly forming over the ocean surface. Another pilot who had just landed attempted to warn him about poor visibility, but was unable to reach John in time. The aircraft shot upward into the dark sky. The net of fate had officially been cast. On the ground, a layer of hazy fog is only a minor inconvenience, but when you are flying thousands of feet above a dark ocean, it becomes a deadly trap. After leaving the coast of Connecticut and entering the Rhode Island Sound, John faced a life-changing decision. He could have chosen to fly along the brightly lit coastline, a safer route that would have added only 5 more minutes to the flight. However, perhaps because he was anxious after falling behind schedule, he decided to turn and take a direct 34-mile route across a section of the Atlantic Ocean, with not a single light in sight. This choice sent the aircraft directly into what pilots call a black hole. At an altitude of 5,500 feet, the fog completely blended the sky and the sea into one solid mass of darkness, erasing every visible horizon. Darkness swallowed the crown of power. Without visual reference points outside the aircraft and without instrument flight skills, John's inner ear system began deceiving his body. His body signaled that the aircraft was flying straight, but in reality, it was gradually tilting. Radar data from the final moments showed that the plane was moving in an extremely chaotic pattern, turning right, then left, then right again, suddenly climbing upward before diving sharply downward. At 9:40 p.m., in a desperate attempt to regain control, John pulled hard on the control yoke, but this action accidentally pushed the aircraft into what is known as a death spiral, a state of unrecoverable free fall. The descent speed rose to a terrifying level, plunging directly toward the ocean at 4,700 feet per minute. The dark sea struck with violent force. The metal structure shattered. At exactly 9:41 p.m., approximately 7.5 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, the aircraft crashed violently into the water, instantly taking the lives of John, Carolyn, and Lauren. Money cannot protect you from bare death in the middle of the sea, and all 3 lives came to an end in the silent darkness of the vast ocean. The United States Coast Guard and Navy launched an unprecedented large-scale search operation. 5 days passed in the desperate anticipation of all of America. Finally, on July 21, Navy divers found the wreckage of the shattered aircraft resting 116 feet beneath the ocean floor. The bodies of the 3 passengers were still trapped in their seats. Following John's wish to rest in the sea, Their ashes were scattered into the Atlantic Ocean from the deck of the destroyer USS Briscoe during a ceremony completely free of media presence. The sudden death of John F. Kennedy Jr. at the age of 38 permanently ended the image of America's prince. He left behind unfinished pages of a magazine struggling to survive, a marriage attempting to heal, and a political future that millions had been waiting for. The ocean embraced him completely, carrying away with it the question that will never have an answer about who that young man might have become if, on that night, he had made a different decision. A lonely and merciless ending to a chapter of life buried deep within the secret world of long-established wealthy elites. The ocean embraced him completely, carrying with it the question that will never have an answer about who that young man might have become if, on that night, he had made a different decision. But history has no place for assumptions, and the cruel fate of the world of old elites always chooses the coldest endings to transform a mortal life into an immortal legend. The passing of America's prince at the age of 38 was not only the end of a royal bloodline, but also the collapse of all expectations and shattered dreams of a reborn Camelot dynasty. We look at the outward glamour but hidden tragedy behind the Kennedy family and ask ourselves, was the crown of power passed down through blood and tears truly a privilege, or was it merely a golden cage imprisoning one's identity? Escape. That was all John and Carolyn did throughout their short years of youth. One skated, shirtless through the winds of Manhattan, while the other locked herself inside 4 lonely walls with her little dog. Both exhausted their mental health simply to gain a few moments of bare privacy behind the lens of the world. Money cannot protect you from the toxic scrutiny of public opinion, and all the enormous wealth, all the majestic 15-room apartments on Fifth Avenue could not buy a clear sky for that fateful flight on that night. If John had not refused his flight instructor that night, if Carolyn had not been delayed by Manhattan traffic, would they have had to face the black hole in the sky where the boundary between sea and sky disappeared? That question will remain suspended forever above the waters of the Atlantic Ocean, standing as proof that the price of privilege is sometimes paid through misplaced confidence in the face of nature and fate. The story of John and Carolyn is not only a tragedy of the elite class, but also a profound reflection of the value of anonymous peace in everyday life. Is it truly worth sacrificing freedom and peace of mind only to receive a lonely ending beneath the depths of the dark sea? If your heart also tightened and your mind filled with reflection after witnessing the tearful shadows hidden behind the glamour of the Golden Age, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss future journeys of deeper exploration. Your support and your comments sharing personal perspectives are the greatest comfort for the souls lost within the hidden world of traditional wealthy families. Leave your thoughts below. In your opinion, what truly destroyed the love and life of America's prince? Thank you for listening, and see you in the next videos.